There was only one name that mattered: Bumpy Johnson.
September 17th, 1957, 11 in the morning. Joe Bonanno, the Don of one of the 5 families, stood in his Brooklyn stronghold clutching a small parcel. Some ghost dropped it off. His hands shook just a little as he cracked the seal. Packed on ice, lined up straight like soldiers, were 10 human fingers, chopped clean at the second knuckle, preserved cold. You could tell who they belonged to by the gold band on the left ring finger. It was Frank Scalise's ring, Bonanno's top man for making deals. The typed note sitting under the meat was short and to the point. Here are the hands that tried to disrespect me. They won't be making offers ever again. Send another guy to tax my business, and he comes back in pieces. Harlem is my house. I run it. I feed off it. You don't get a dime. Cross this line again, and you'll find out just how serious I am about keeping what belongs to me. Bonanno looked hard at those 10 digits. That was all that was left of Frank Scalise's ability to do business in this life. His gut reaction was pure fire. This was a hit that called for total war. But then he read the note one more time. Bonanno realized something that would shift how he played the game in Harlem forever. 3 days before this mess, he sent Scalise to squeeze 50% out of Bumpy Johnson. Scalise called it a favor. Now, Scalise's fingers were chilling in a box on the Don's desk, and Bumpy Johnson had sent a message so cold and final that it would kill any thoughts of a shakedown before they even started. Try to rob Bumpy, lose the hands that did the reaching. Bonanno didn't get the full picture yet, but he'd learn it in the days to come. The commission wouldn't back his play for revenge. He'd see that those 10 fingers in that box meant a lot more than just one guy getting butchered. They marked the end of the Italian mob, thinking they could run over black bosses just because they had the numbers and the name. Bumpy Johnson had changed the laws of the street. September 14th, 1957, 2:47 in the afternoon. Frank Scalise, 43, slick hair, sharp face, walking tall like he owned the place. He strolled into Small's Paradise in Harlem, carrying a briefcase and the swagger of a man, backed by one of the heaviest outfits in the States. He was there to give Bumpy a deal. Or better put, to drop a threat, dressed up as a handshake. Scalise sat opposite Bumpy and cracked the case, pulling out the papers for the Bonanno plan. He spoke smooth, like he practiced in a mirror, talking down to him. "Mr. Johnson, the Don is real impressed with the work you're doing uptown. He thinks we can work together. The family brings protection and the muscle to help run your business right. Numbers, loans, the clubs, the bricks, we cover it all. In return, we take half the cut. You do this, and you stay on top. We keep the cops and the other crews off your back." Bumpy sat there and took in every word without making a sound. When the suit stopped talking, Bumpy asked one thing: "What happens if I say no?" Scalise's answer showed the steel behind the smile. "The Don wouldn't take that well. We got reach you can't touch, soldiers, politicians in our pocket, and legit fronts to hide the dirt. Without us, things get messy. The cops come knocking, other crews move in, and your supply lines dry up. Shake hands, you win. Walk away, and you're making a bad bet." Bumpy stood up slow, his face made of stone. "Tell the Don thanks for looking, but I'm passing on the gift. I built this empire without his help, and I'll keep running it without him. If he sends guys to start the trouble you're talking about, there's gonna be hell to pay." Scalise blinked. He wasn't used to hearing that. Most guys who got a visit from the commission either folded right there, or they begged for a better split. Nobody just said no. "Mr. Johnson, I don't think you get how this works. We ain't haggling here." The Don made up his mind. "You take the deal now while it's good, or you deal with the heat later. But the end is always the same." Bumpy's voice dropped to a whisper, and anybody who knew him knew that meant death was in the room. "Mr. Scalise, get out of my neighborhood. You tell Joe Bonanno that Bumpy Johnson doesn't pay rent to nobody. And if he keeps trying to grab what's mine, he's going to get a message he can't ignore." Scalise walked out, sure that Bumpy just signed his own death warrant and the family would crush him. He didn't know that in 48 hours. He'd be losing all 10 fingers in a surgery meant to tell Joe Bonanno exactly what time it was. Scalise was blind. Years of muscling people for the family made him forget how the real world worked. He didn't see he was just trying to steal, using hate to justify the grab. Asking for half wasn't business. It was a shakedown, plain and simple. The thought process was easy. You're black, we're Italian, so we run you. Bumpy spent his life fighting that exact kind of thinking. He built his throne to make sure black businessmen in Harlem could hold their own cash without bowing to white bosses. Bonanno was exactly the kind of monster Bumpy was made to fight. A few hours after Scalise walked, Bumpy called a sit-down with his top guys. Illinois Gordon was there, and, he said, the boss was hotter than he'd seen him in years. It wasn't just the cash, even if 50% was insane. It was the insult. Bonanno thinking he could just waltz in and take half the kingdom, thinking the boss would just roll over. Just because they had more men, Bumpy said. They think I kneel because of who they are. They're about to get a lesson in real power. It ain't about the color of your skin or who your daddy was. It's about who has the stones to draw a line in the sand. That's when the boss gave the word, "Go fetch Scalise." He wanted a message sent to Bonanno, one loud enough that nobody would ever think to cross him again. We mapped out the grab on Frank Scalise down to the second. Scalise headed back to Brooklyn, feeling like a king, sure that he had rattled Bumpy's cage enough to make him fold. He thought he was untouchable on his home turf, surrounded by his crew. But every man has a weakness, and his was a routine he couldn't break. Angela Romano, a 28-year-old beauty in a Williamsburg flat paid for with dirty money. It was Tuesday, September 16th, 7:30 in the evening. He kissed his wife goodbye with a lie about business on his lips. He drove out to Williamsburg and parked his car just down the street from his girl's place. He walked the half-block like he owned the sidewalk, but he never made it through the door. 4 of us swarmed him, and before he could blink, a rag soaked in chloroform smothered his face. He kicked for a second, then went limp as a rag doll, and we tossed him in the back. We hauled him out to a warehouse in Queens that the boss kept for special conversations. Scalise woke up around 9:30, strapped tight to a chair in a room with barely enough light to see his own fear. His arms were pinned, fingers splayed out wide and locked down. Even a fool would know that whatever was coming, it was gonna happen to his hands. Bumpy Johnson sat across from him like a judge, while Illinois Gordon and James Cooper stood guard like bailiffs. Cooper was 54, a man with steady hands and a surgeon's kit. Scalise looked at them, trying to act tough through his confusion. "Johnson, you just signed your own death warrant. I am a captain in the Bonanno family. You touch me, and you start a war that burns you to ash. Let me go, and maybe the dawn will let you live." Bumpy didn't even blink, his voice like ice. "Mr. Scalise, 3 days ago you walked into Harlem with an insult wrapped in a demand. You wanted 50% of my take for protection I never asked for. You hinted that saying no would bring heat down on my head. You acted like I should thank you for robbing me blind. That was a fatal error in your arithmetic." Scalise tried to keep his chin up, though his sweat betrayed him. "That was just business, a simple offer. If you are too proud to take it, that is on you. But snatching me, that just digs your grave deeper." Bumpy shook his head, slow and sad. "I ain't holding you for ransom, pal. I am sending your Don a memo on what happens when he tries to squeeze me. You are just the envelope, or rather, pieces of you are." Scalise looked at his pinned hands, then at the doctor's blade. The tough guy act crumbled, leaving only raw panic. "What is this? You can't do this. You've lost your mind. Bonanno will wipe you off the map for this. Mr. Scalise, you used those hands to serve me an insult. You handed me papers trying to steal what I built. Those hands are guilty of theft and disrespect. They won't ever make that mistake again. I am taking all 10 fingers. You will live through it." but you will never shake on a deal or sign a contract again. You are going to be a walking billboard for what happens when someone tries to touch my business." The next 90 minutes were a slow, bloody nightmare. Cooper went to work, taking Frank Scalise's fingers one by one. He cut them at the second knuckle, clean and precise. It was done with care, keeping the blood loss low and the wounds clean. Bumpy needed him alive to tell the tale, not dead on the floor. Cooper numbed him up just enough to keep his heart from stopping, but not enough to hide the horror of it. Between every cut, Bumpy leaned in close to deliver a sermon. He explained, the price being paid. This one demanded my cash gone. This one pointed at the papers, stealing my profit gone. This one waved a threat in my face gone. Scalise howled like a wounded animal, begging and promising the moon just to make it stop. But Bumpy was made of stone. Every severed digit was dropped into a jar of ice and chemicals, preserved like a trophy. By the time the 10th one hit the jar, Scalise was broken, his mind shattered by the pain and the sight of his own ruin. We wrapped his stumps tight to keep the blood inside. We made sure he was stable enough to survive the night. On September 17th, we dumped him near a hospital in Brooklyn with a note taped to his chest, telling the doctors how to save him. The nurses found him and patched him up. The report said it was a traumatic amputation of every single finger on both hands. Scalise couldn't write down who did it. A man with no fingers can't hold a pen. He couldn't speak through the drugs and the shock. The cops pushed him, but he kept his mouth shut, refusing to name names. He knew better than to talk. Meanwhile, as the sun came up, a small package arrived at Joseph Bonanno's front door. It contained the complete set of Frank Scalise's fingers. And that brings us right back to where we started. Bonanno standing in his office, staring at 10 frozen fingers and reading a letter about respect and boundaries. His first instinct was pure fire. His top guy had been butchered and humiliated, leaving him useless. It was a declaration of war that screamed for blood. But as he cooled down and talked to his consiglieres, the picture got complicated. There were problems with hitting back. First off, Scalise getting chopped up was just a receipt for the move Bonanno made first. Bonanno threw the first punch by demanding half of Bumpy's cut. The commission would see Bumpy's brutality as a justified defense of his property. Second, Bumpy proved he knew exactly where to cut. He knew the family's weak spots, and he wasn't afraid to use a scalpel. Snatching Scalise right out of Brooklyn, right under the Bonanno family's nose, that showed a level of tactical genius the mob never saw coming. If Bonanno wanted to escalate, how many more of his soldiers would Bumpy snatch and carve up? Plus, a war in the streets brings the kind of heat nobody wants. The feds were already watching the commission like hawks. But the real kicker? Bonanno's demand had been greedy, even for a wise guy. Asking for 50% without putting anything on the table? That's robbery. The other families wouldn't back a war started by his own gluttony. Bonanno sat on it for days, running the numbers. In the end, he made the cold play. No retaliation for the butcher job on Scalise. He decided to swallow the insult and close the book, taking the hit to his pride rather than starting a bloodbath he couldn't win. He went to the commission, pleading his case. Said he offered Johnson a partnership and got a violent rejection in return. Complained his negotiator got mangled over business. But the room was ice cold. Carlo Gambino, the boss of bosses, looked right through him. Gambino reportedly told him, "You tried to squeeze Johnson for half his empire while offering zero protection or value. That was greedy and plain stupid. He sent your boy's fingers back to teach you manners. That's a receipt, Joe. It's rough, sure, but he made his point. You want backing for a war? Forget it. You stepped in it. You clean it up by walking away." The commission left Bonanno out in the cold. If he wanted Bumpy, he stood alone. Knowing the odds, Bonanno folded. The Bonanno crew never tried to shake down Bumpy again. Frank Scalise survived the knife. Yeah, but his life was over. No fingers means you're helpless. Couldn't eat without a nurse or special tools. Couldn't button his own shirt. Writing? Forget about it. Working? Impossible. The family threw him a few bucks to keep him alive, but his days as an earner were dead and buried. No hands means no trigger, no counting cash, no respect. Scalise became a walking ghost in the Bonanno halls, a grim reminder of the price you pay for underestimating a man like Bumpy Johnson. Every guy who saw him struggle learned something. They remembered the code. Know your place. Don't put your hand in another man's pocket unless you're ready to lose it. And never think being Italian makes you king of the hill against a black boss in Harlem. The shockwaves of that hit hard. It went way beyond the Bonannos. The word hit the street fast. Scalise went uptown demanding half the pie, and came back with 10 stumps. Maybe the story got juiced up in the telling, but the core truth was scary enough. Bumpy Johnson didn't just say no. He ended careers. You try to squeeze him, you leave a piece of yourself behind. Other outfits eyeing Harlem took a step back. The Lucchese crew had plans to whet their beaks uptown. After seeing Scalise, those plans vanished. The Colombo family stopped leaning on Harlem businesses overnight. Silence. Years later, Illinois Gordon broke down the boss's genius. He said, if Bumpy clipped Scalise, it starts a war the commission has to fight. But taking his hands, leaving him breathing as a testament to the mistake, that's strategy. It was brutal, but calculated. It wasn't murder. It was a receipt for an unpaid bill, a response to a threat, not a start to a war. And that message never fades. Scalise couldn't hide those stumps. Anyone looking at him knew exactly why he was crippled. That visibility kept the wolves away. The symbolic weight of destroying a man's hands was understood by every made guy. Hands are the tools of the trade. You shake on deals, you count the skim, you pull the trigger. By taking the fingers, Bumpy killed the function. Scalise was still walking and talking, but as a mobster, he was finished. The punishment fit the crime perfectly. Scalise used those hands to slide a disrespectful deal across the table, so those hands were confiscated. When Bumpy passed in 1968, 11 years later, this story was the headline of his legend. The wise guys still whispered about how the Bonannos tried to flex and got a box of fingers in the mail. It became the gold standard for how Bumpy held his ground against the big families. Frank Scalise dragged on until 1983, 26 years without a grip, isolated, broken, useless, just a cautionary tale on the payroll. If you respect the hustle, smash that like button right now. If this story taught you that respect is bought with blood and iron, drop a comment below. Did Bumpy go too far? Or was carving Scalise up simply the cost of doing business? Was it a fair trade for 50% of a man's soul? Hit subscribe, because these aren't just stories. They're lessons in power, showing how boundaries are drawn in the underworld using strategic brutality. Don't forget the timeline of those 3 bloody days. September 14th, 2:47 p.m. Scalise lays down the heavy demand. 50% of everything. Bumpy gives him a flat no. September 16th, 7:30 p.m. Scalise gets snatched in Brooklyn. 90 minutes of surgery later, no more fingers. He lives. Barely. September 17th, a package hits Bonanno's desk. 10 fingers and a note. Stay out of Harlem. Bonanno checked with the commission, but got 0 backing, so he swallowed the insult rather than triggering a war. Scalise survived 26 years without fingers as a grim reminder, and Bonanno never tried to shake down Harlem again. The hit became a legendary warning. It ain't just refusing a shakedown, it's sending a message so permanent it kills any thought of trying again. 10 fingers in a box. One loud message. Try to rob Bumpy Johnson, and you lose the hands that reached for the prize.